France has lost its power because Macron has let power slip away from France. It is, of course, totally unacceptable. And Mr. Macron should have said clearly, very clearly to Mrs. von der Leyen, we cannot accept the signature of Mercosur. Our farmers we cannot do that. Our farmers are the great victims of that, and our farmers need to be protected against these unfair trade regulations that are ruining in their businesses. We want French food for French people, and we need to protect our farm sector. That's what Marine Le Pen stands for. And of course, Mr. Macron was saying, yes, I will oppose it, and nothing will happen. But as you rightly say, Ursula von der Leyen is just sort of ignoring him and saying, well, here I am off to Uruguay and trying to sign this before the weekend. Yes, Mr. Macron not has only lost credibility and power within France, but also on the European and the world stage.
Well, Marine Le Pen's hard-right National Rally Party has been a key part of the bloc lobbying against the government. We can speak now to a member of the National Rally and former MEP for the party, Patricia Chagnon. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, I mean, your response to what President Macron has said, that the MPs who brought down this government were only thinking about the prospect of a new presidential election, and that political opponents like Marine Le Pen are trying to force new elections. Is that true?
Well, it's a very peculiar way for Mr. Macron to be expressing the dire situation into which he dragged our country. There is only one person responsible for this political crisis, and that's Mr. Macron himself. He called snap elections just a couple of months ago. And the results of these snap elections showed clearly the great opposition in France against his policies. So Macron lost his majority in Parliament, and has since named a government who is just pretending as if it were business as usual, and pushing through a budget, trying to push through a budget, proposing a budget that, of course, is totally unacceptable to the French people. The French people very clearly said, 11 million voters for the Rassemblement National clearly said, making us the biggest single party in Parliament, that taxes had to come down, pensions had to be protected. France's sovereignty needed to increase again. Our farmers have been on the roads, just like in Britain and other European countries, manifesting against free trade agreements that is pushing them with unfair competition. Taxations need to come down to liberate enterprises and small companies to create jobs. And Macron basically has heard nothing of that. And his government has proposed a budget which increases taxes, which deregulizes pensions, no longer linking them to inflations. So we can absolutely not agree to this. So it is not the Rassemblement National waging trouble in France. It is Mr. Macron who refuses to listen to the French people and who refuses to acknowledge the results of the last elections.
He does, of course, say he's got a 5-year mandate. He is not going anywhere. It's interesting as well that Xavier Bertrand, who is a prominent member of the Conservative Republicans, has said that Marine Le Pen is trying to push this through and get forcing an early presidential election because she fears she may be declared ineligible for political office when the verdict of her corruption trial is announced in March. Is that true?
Well, Xavier Bertrand, I was a regional councillor with him under his presidency in the north of France for 6 years, so I know him quite well. Mr. Bertrand, he's in a region where the majority of people are voting for the Rassemblement National. The only way he's sitting in office is because there are 2 tier elections in which they all group together. So he's a quite insignificant person in France.
Well, irrespective of that, what about the point he makes that it is true, it's factual that Marine Le Pen is facing a corruption trial. The verdict will be announced in March. If she were to be found guilty, she wouldn't be allowed to stand for political office. His claim is she's trying to push this through before that. How do you respond to that specific claim?
Mr. Bertrand evidently hasn't seen the budget that is trying to be enforced upon the French people. No, Marine Le Pen's only motivation is to protect the French people from this horrible budget that they're trying to inflict on them with increased taxes, with reducing reimbursements of medicines, with increased taxes for businesses. And Marine Le Pen has only that in sight. It is impossible for us to vote a budget as was presented, and really any other arguments being put forward are totally ridiculous and out of subject.
I just wonder how you feel about, well, France's standing, if you like, on the European Union stage. I mean, it's quite incredible and wouldn't have happened just a few years ago that Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, would fly out to Uruguay and agree a trade deal, which quite frankly was completely opposed by France. It shows how France used to have such power in the European Union and how that seems to have ebbed away in the last few years.
You're absolutely right in saying that, and that's been a result. Yes, it's power because Macron has let power slip away from France. It is, of course, totally unacceptable, and Mr. Macron should have said clearly, very clearly, to Mrs. von der Leyen, we cannot accept the signature of Mercosur. Our farmers we cannot do that. Our farmers are the great victims of that, and our farmers need to be protected against these unfair trade regulations that are ruining in their businesses. We want French food for French people, and we need to protect our farm sector. That's what Marine Le Pen stands for. And of course, Mr. Macron was saying, yes, I will oppose it, and nothing will happen. But as you rightly say, Ursula von der Leyen is just sort of ignoring him and saying, well, here I am off to Uruguay and trying to sign this before the weekend. Yes, Mr. Macron not has only lost credibility and power within France, but also on the European and the world stage.
I guess one of the challenges at the moment is economic problems for countries across Europe. Globally, economies are struggling. And I just wonder, in your criticism of what Macron is doing and his government were doing, what would you do differently when you've got to balance the books?
When you've got to balance the books, you've got to reduce expenditure. Mr. Macron's only way to overcome the hurdles of society is to increase taxes to have more money to spend. We say there needs to be a reduction in spending. We can reduce money by tracking fraud. There is a tremendous fraud in France. We can reduce money by harmonizing all the different administrative and bureaucratic structures we have in France. We need to look at the amount that we give to the European Union. We are one of the main contributors to the EU budget. It's over 20 billion a year. We need to tell the European Union we've got to decrease this because our country is in a dire situation and we can no longer contribute that type of those types of sums to the EU. So there are many ways in which we can find ways to reduce expenses of the government rather than what Mr. Macron is doing, punishing the people who are hardworking people, punishing the people who are sick by reducing their medicine reimbursements, punishing small businesses by increasing their taxes. We cannot function like this. The country is going down. French people know it. This is why they massively voted against Macron when the snap elections, National Assembly elections were called.
But he is still a president. One final question. I'll ask you to be brief, if you wouldn't mind. I noticed that France's foreign minister has put out a message of unity on social media saying instability is vulnerability. Are you making, by these moves that you've done to make sure that Michel Barnier had to stand down as prime minister, are you actually making France more vulnerable, more unstable, more insecure?
Well, the facts are that yesterday the French stock exchange was going up. So all the scary, the banishing of scary stories about how this was going to affect the stock exchange in Paris apparently were wrong. Small businesses are rather reassured that Macron's taxing program, new taxes, are not going to be applied. No, our aim is first of all to protect the French people. Marine Le Pen said it very clearly yesterday, again in a very long TV interview that she had. The first aim of us is to make sure that this budget, which is going to affect the normal people, the normal hardworking people in France, everyday working people in France, small businesses in France, will not be deployed. And anything going beyond that is just creating a hype. We are their party to protect the French people and to not let Mr. Macron yet again find the money in their pockets to rule out his plan, rather than reducing what he should be doing, expenditures that are useless for our country and that are mining the public budget.
Patricia, thank you for joining us. That is Patricia Chagnon. She is a member of the National Rally. That's Marine Le Pen's hard right party in France.